In this video, we're going to talk about how to get unsecured, no-doc business loans and lines of credit. In fact, I'm going to cover with you the steps that you need to take in order to get ready to apply, my favorite list source, which contains a bunch of unsecured business line of credit lenders, and how to build a relationship with the point of contact at the bank so that you can get approved. Stay tuned. All right, so let's talk about steps to get ready. Very important before you apply for an unsecured business line of credit, especially if it's no doc, that you take certain steps to get ready. And I've broken this down into two categories. The first is to get compliant, and the second is to build up your business credit score. So let's dive into a business line of credit application that we've actually recently submitted. If you look at the application, there's some questions that they ask. For example, name of your business, the address, phone number, etc. When we're looking at your business address, you want to make sure that you're not using a PO box or a virtual address. So you either need to have a physical address, like a real office, of course, or a shared office is okay, but you want to avoid a UPS box or a virtual office. Home addresses, in some cases, are okay. Preferably, you want to add a suite. So if your home address is 123 Main Street, you would put down the address as 123 Main Street, Suite 1, etc. For business phone number, you want to have a local landline. 800 number is okay, but we like to work with local community banks and credit unions, so they like to see a local presence. You get a local landline from any source online. VoIP phone numbers are fine as well, like Vonage, for example. When you get a phone number, just make sure that you get the phone number listed. Make sure that you have a good online presence, so if the underwriter Googles you, they can see that your phone number is listed and that they can actually see a little bit about your information when they look you up on the internet. Another tip is that your company needs to be compliant. So make sure you reach out to your municipality, your county, your state, even the federal government, that you have everything in compliance. That means that you're filing your annual filing fee if that's required, and you have a license if that's required in your city or your county. Just make sure you have those steps completed. All right, so those are some good tips that are going to help your company be compliant, which is very important before you apply for business lines of credit. Now, let's talk about building up your business credit score. I have another video that talks about how you can use net 30 vendors to build up your business credit score, and I'll share that video with you guys. Right here. The reason you do that is you want to build up your business credit score as strong as you can so that before you apply for business loans or business lines of credit, you have your business credit score established and that it looks really good. So when the bank does your application and the underwriter looks at everything, they say, okay, the company's compliant, they have a good online presence, and they have a good business credit score. You want to take all these steps before applying, especially if it's a no-doc and unsecured business line of credit. All right, now let's talk about my favorite list of how I find unsecured, no-doc business lines of credit and loans. I start with the SBA lender list for your specific state. It doesn't mean that we're trying to get an SBA loan. It just means that I found an amazing source of banks, local community banks and credit unions that are the top lending banks in your area. And the list that we want to work with is the SBA participating lenders list. So for example, you can go to Google and you can type in SBA lender list, New Jersey. Just replace New Jersey with your state. I'm going to click on the link real quick. I'm going to pull it up and we've got right here, we can look at this. This is a list of the top lending banks in my state. And these banks are small business friendly. That's why they're on the SBA list, okay? So in this list, I can tell you there are a handful of banks that I've worked with that offer no-doc unsecured business lines of credit. In fact, some of them include TD Bank, M&T Bank, Santander has a low-doc program, Wells Fargo, PNC has a no-doc program, Fulton Bank, etc. This is the source. This is the magic sauce right here. What I do is I take these banks here and I put it on a spreadsheet. I type in all the information on the spreadsheet, and then we call all of the banks. So in this case, there's a lot. There's over 100 banks that you would need to reach out to, and you ask them questions like what programs they offer. Do they offer unsecured business lines of credit, term loans, etc. And if they offer no-doc or low-doc programs. The truth of the matter is about 5% or so of these banks have no-doc programs. So out of 100 banks, you'll come up with a handful of banks that are offering unsecured, no doc business lines of credit or term loans. And even though the majority of them will require financial statements and documents like that, there's still a whole bunch of banks within this list. In fact, I just mentioned a handful of them that offer no doc business loans and lines of credit. So you got to make the calls, you got to walk into the bank, you got to meet the vice president of business lending, and you got to see what programs they have. And a lot of the banks might say, no, we don't offer a no doc program, but that's okay. You got to make the next call, and you'll find a handful of banks that do offer business loans and lines of credit that are no doc. A big part of this is building a relationship with the local community bank, and specifically with the vice president of business lending. So if you look at some of these banks, you go on their website, they're not going to tell you a lot of information. Not always, especially the smaller banks, which are really the gold in this list, is with the small community banks. So they might not necessarily be updating their website that often. So you may have to actually go in and visit the bank or actually call them. And because these banks are local community banks and they're portfolio lenders, they're a lot easier to work with some of the national banks. And what I mean by that is that a handful of these banks, they only have a couple of branches, and they're very relationship based. In fact, some of these banks actually have a lending committee where they'll look at your application, and a lending committee, like people, will actually meet and review your application, review your information, and make a judgment call on if they want to lend money to you, which is really cool. So it's not always just a systemized, computerized process with some of the bigger national lenders. I really like to work with the local community banks, the portfolio lenders that lend their own money, because they make their own rules. So after you've gotten your company compliant and you've built up your business credit score in such a way that banks are willing to lend to you, and now you know how to reach out to the banks and see what programs they have, it's time to apply. When you go through the application, just make sure you review everything, and you can even ask the vice president of business lending or whoever your point of contact is at the bank to kind of look over things. A lot of times you can just be honest with them and ask them the questions. And there are, to me, two types of bankers, right? There's the first type, which they don't want to tell you a lot of information. They just tell you, go ahead and apply, see what happens. That's not really our favorite type of banker to work with. The second type is someone that's like a real hustler, working really hard. They want to help you get approved. They're going to advocate for you to the underwriter and try to help, push things along. That's the contact that we're looking to find. And again, you got to make a lot of calls and visit a lot of banks to find that person, that go-to person at the bank. But once you do, they can advocate for your approval. And even if you apply for, let's say, a $100,000 business line of credit and they don't approve you, oftentimes they'll counter with you and come back with, a $50,000 counter or something like that. So it's super valuable to work with closely with your point of contact, especially when you're doing the applications. And on that note of building a relationship with the local bank, after you have the approval and you use the credit line responsibly and you keep in touch with the point of contact at the bank, you can request a credit limit increase. Every 6 months, you could see if they'll be willing to extend more credit to you, assuming you've been using the line of credit responsibly. It's very likely that they will extend a credit limit increase. So that's the process. This list of banks is incredible. With TD Bank, I have over $100,000 business line of credit with them. With M&T Bank, I have a $35,000 business credit card, a $40,000 business line of credit. Fulton Bank is on this list. I have a $50,000 business line of credit with them. All of these have been obtained as no doc, unsecured business lines of credit. If you want to learn more about the process of obtaining business lines of credit, you could either check us out at our website, which is businesscreditworkshop.me, that's M-E, or just check out some of the other videos that we have here on YouTube. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe so you can be notified of when the next video comes out.